I'm Dr. Kristen R. Bromley. This video series, which is part of my online music academy, specifically accompanies Note Reading Book 3 from my Method book series. Like all my books, this selection is available to purchase through Amazon and Google Play. For help, see the links in the description below. In the videos which are part of this specific course, I progress through the lessons in Note Reading Book 3, explaining and demonstrating concepts and playing each of the songs and exercises contained therein, so you can hear how they sound and play them right along with me. You are of course welcome to view these videos with or without the book, but with the book you can work through all the songs and exercises, and in the process come to know the entire fretboard and master the skill of playing written notes all along the neck. Alright, let's get to jamming in this lesson. Hi, I'm Dr. Kristen Bromley. Welcome back. We are in lesson 15 that goes with this Note Reading Book 3. So this video matches Note Reading Book 3 lesson 15. We're working on the key of A major. So the same kind of thing we've been doing in the last few lessons, only now we're working the key of A major. Let's go ahead and dive in. There on page 118, number 1, we've got the single octave scale for A, so an A major single octave scale. In this octave, we can play that major scale with our middle finger on that A on the 6th string at the 5th fret using scale form 1. Or we can do it using scale form 2 with our pinky on that A note. You can practice it both ways. I'm just going to play it one way. I'm going to go ahead and use scale form 1 with my middle finger on that 5th fret. So we're going to go ahead and go 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, and let's go over to page 119. We'll look at number 2. So with number 2, we're an octave higher. We've got some different options for this one. We've got our middle finger on the 5th string at the 12th fret. So we've got scale form 1 there. You could also read scale form 2 with your pinky on that A. On the 4th string, you've got your middle finger for scale form 1 on fret 7. Or scale form 2 with your pinky on that note. And then we've also got scale form 1 on the 3rd string with your index finger or middle finger on that 2nd fret, so that A on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. I'm going to go ahead and read it with scale form 2 in 4th position. So my pinky is going to be on the A at the 7th fret on the 4th string. So I'm going to go 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, and if we look at number 3, we have one option for playing this one, and that is all the way up with our index finger at the 14th fret on the 3rd string with scale form 1. So that's the option that we have. Let's go ahead and do that one. It's going to have 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, let's flip on over to page 120 and we'll look at the minor options now. So we've got F sharp minor and we've got scale form 1. The only way we can play number 4 is with scale form 1 in second position, where our index is on that F sharp note at the second fret. So go ahead and do that. We got 1 and 2 and ready and go and. Okay, now if we look at number 5, in this octave we have a couple different options. So on the 5th string, our index finger at the 9th fret with scale form 1. We've also got in that with that root note, we've got our pinky on the 9th fret, scale form 2. On the 4th string, at the 4th fret with our index finger, we have scale form 1. Same root with our pinky at that 4th fret, 4th string, we've got scale form 2. And those are the ones that we have in this particular octave. So I'm going to go ahead and play this in 4th position with scale form 1. But you can do any of those positions, you can do all of those positions actually. So I'm going to go 1 and 2 and ready and go and. if we look on the next page, we've got it in the higher octave. So with that one, on the 3rd string, we have scale form 1 at the 11th fret. So and you could also actually go up to the, well, it'd be the 16th fret of the 4th string. I had to count that. If you had that in you, you could read it just like we were doing just now, only up an octave. But in that position, you also have with your pinky on that 4th fret, scale form 1. Or, sorry, scale form 2. So that's another place where you could read that one. I'm going to go ahead and read it in 11th position, 11th and 12th position. So I'm going to stick my index finger on that F sharp at the 11th fret on the 3rd string. So you can read it anywhere. Okay, here we go. 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, now we'll go on and do the positions. So we're looking at position 2 and 1, depending on when we have to shift down for that G sharp, for example. But we're going to go ahead and do this starting with the F sharp minor scale in position 2 on. This is exercise 7. So you may want to warm up a little bit with this position. So find those notes in that position for this particular exercise. So here we go. Take this one nice and slow. 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, we'll flip on over to page 122, and we're going to do the A major scale exercise in this position. So pinky is on that A, and we're reading in that position, but if you want to run that A major scale, you can, if that'll help. So we're going to take it nice and slow again. You got 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, let's do a couple melodies. So over on page 123, we've got America, or My Country 'Tis of Thee. 3/4 time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we'll do Jamaica Farewell. So you got 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, we'll flip on over to page 124. We got green sleeves. Now with green sleeves, we've got some chromatic notes, so you kind of got to watch for that. The G natural, you've got up on that 4th string at the 5th fret. Might be a place to reach that, or just cheat with the open 3rd string. You've got A sharp, which you can come up to that 6th fret on the 6th string, or that 1st fret on the 5th string. So you just kind of play with it and find where they work best. You got a G natural up on that top string, so just kind of watch for them and shift as needed. So here we go. I'm going to give us 3, 1, 2 in the count off. 3, 1, 2. Okay, and we'll go on to number 12. So now we're moving up to 4th position. So with F minor, which is what we're going to start with, actually we're starting with the A major. So we'll go ahead and look at the A major scale. So we got the middle finger on the 5th fret on the 6th string, starting with scale form 1, then scale form 2, got that piece of scale form 1 on top, and that piece of scale form 2 on bottom. So this exercise goes on both pages 124 and 125, so you want to watch for that. So you're going to go 1 and 2 and ready and go and. Okay, and we'll look at the F sharp minor scale in position 4, exercise number 10, so number 13. We're going to go 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, let's go ahead over to page 126 and do some melodies. We're going to start with Welcome Guest. This one has a chromatic note in it, so you got to watch for that D sharp. So on the 5th string, when we have the D at the 5th fret, we're going to have D sharp at the 6th fret. And when we're up on the higher octave, we've got a D with our pinky at the 7th fret on the 3rd string. The best place with this melody to catch the D sharp is on the 2nd string at the 4th fret. So you gotta watch for that. We're in 3/4 time. I'll give us 3, 1, 2, and then we'll be in. 3, 1, 2. Okay, I will do number 15, Auld Lang Syne. This one comes in on beat 4 in the pickup measure. I'll give us a 3-beat count in. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we're on to number 16, Old Joe Clark. This one has a G natural, so you gotta watch for the G natural. It's easy to find on the 4th string at the 5th fret instead of the G sharp. But for the higher one, you've got on the 2nd string, you've got the one at the 8th fret. On the 1st string, you could reach down to the one at the 3rd fret. So you gotta watch for those. I'll probably be using on that 2nd string the one that's at the 8th fret on that 2nd string. So here you go. 1 and 2 and. Okay, let's go on to page 127. We're going to be in positions 6 and 7 now, starting with A major. So on that 4th string at the 7th fret, I got my middle finger. I got scale form 1, and then scale form 2, coming back down, scale form 2, just a piece of it, and we're back. Okay, let's go ahead and do this one. 1 and 2 and ready and go and. let's flip on over to page 128 and we'll do minor. So we're going to be in that same position doing the minor. Of course, that F sharp starts with our pinky on the 9th fret, 5th string. So here we go. Although, with where this exercise begins, you may want to start with your ring finger there because we're going down lower. So you're going to have 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, let's go on to Dixie, number 19. So we're going to go, comes in on 4 and, I'll give us 3 beat count in. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, and we'll do number 20, Rivertown. So, it comes in on 4 and I'll give us a 3-beat count in. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, and Keokuk, number 21. It comes in on beat 4. I'll give us that 3-beat count in. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we're off to the next position. So we're going to be up in position 9. We're starting with the F sharp minor exercise. So I'm going to go ahead and play that minor scale. We've got our index finger on the F sharp at the 9th fret on the 5th string. So that's where we start. If you struggle to think of the scale form when it's minor, it's okay to go ahead and think of the major one. So our pinky would start on that 12th fret of the 5th string, and if you can find the major scale form, it's the same notes that we're going to be reading. Whether we're playing something in minor or something in major. Okay. We'll go 1 and 2 and ready and go and. we'll flip on over to page 130. And we'll do the A major scale exercise in that position. So this one's in 6/8 time. So it's got that sort of tripletized 1 and a 2 and a rhythm. So I counted off that way, 1 and a 2 and a, but we'll take it a little bit slower. 1 and a 2 and a. Okay, we'll go over and do some melodies now, starting with the Sloop John B. Comes in on beat 4 in the pickup measure, so it was a 3-beat count in, and we'll be in. So you got 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we'll do the Red River Valley. This one comes in on beat 3 in the pickup measure. I'll give us 3, 4, 1, 2, and we'll be in 3, 4, 1, 2. Okay, and we'll do Arkansas Traveler. 1 E and 2 E, and we got a lot of 16th notes here. I'll give us that as a count in. 1 E and 2 E and okay, and we'll flip on over to page 132. We've got the next position up. So we are in position 11 and 12. Starting with A major, we've got our middle finger on the 12th fret, 5th string. We've got the A major scale starting there. And we'll just go ahead and go for it. So we're going to have 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, and we'll go over to page 133 and do number 28, so the minor one now. So I have 1 and 2 and ready and go and. Okay, let's go on to these melodies, starting with number 29, Caledonia. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we'll go on to page 134, do bingo. I'll give us 1 and 2 and 1 and we'll be on beat 2. 1 and 2 and 1 and. do number 31, Frere Jacques. 1, 2, reti, and. And we'll do Oh Susanna. I'll give us a 3-beat count in. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, and as we go on over to page 135, we can look at how we can shift between forms. And I'm not going to go through every example like I've done in the lessons where I introduced that clear back a few lessons ago. But I will do these exercises in one way, and so we'll look at one way we could do it. And of course you can shift to multiple positions. But starting there on page 135 with the major exercises. So we've got our major scale. Scale form 1 in 1 octave. So 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. So that 5th fret of the 6th string is where that low A is. And then we can shift up to the position that's in the 6th and 7th position with that exercise. Now, these exercises stay within a 2-octave root to root to root range. So when we play them, those are the ones that you get to practice. That's the way I'm going to play it. With this one, that's kind of one of the best options because of that low 6th string that's there on that low 6th string, that low A that is with strings that aren't open. We have one open string that's that low, but that's the only spot we have that is that low, so that's a great place to play that one. So I'm going to go 1 and 2 and ready and go and... And we'll look at number 34, which is the same thing up an octave. So the one I'm going to use is at the 12th fret on that 5th string. We've got that A, and then we can go up the octave there. Okay, so we're going to go 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, so on to the minor ones on page 136. We've got scale form 1 in that octave, 2nd fret, clear down on the 6th string, and then we've got it up the octave. And that's the way I'm going to play it. You can play around with different ways to shift, like I've explained in previous lessons, but I'm going to go ahead and do it that way here as a demonstration for this. So we're going to have 1 and 2 and 3 and go and Okay, and then we've got it up the octave. So a couple different ways that we can play that. We've got the F sharp though, that's at the 9th fret of the 5th string, using scale form 1. And then you've got at the 11th position there, up the octave. I'm going to go ahead and do it there. So you're going to have 1 and 2 and ready and go and... Okay, and that wraps us up for this lesson. So great work with the key of A, and we'll be moving on to other keys in future lessons. Hope you're having fun. Keep working on it. Like I often mention, just a little bit a day is the best way to work on this. Take care. We'll see you again. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. For help with other guitar playing skills, check out more of my method books and the numerous lessons available as part of my online academy here on YouTube. You can find more information about me and my products at kristenbromley.com. Take care.